I want to share with you part 3 of the series, Awaken. And again, I apologize to those of you who tried to get online last week and were unable to. So I'll give a brief synopsis of the series as I gave last week. We are looking at 10 resurrections that occurred as recorded in both the New and the Old Testaments. And the theme that we've been camping on is the sovereignty of God. That is, God is in control. I know it may not seem that way right now, as we do not seem to be able to control what we do, where we go, as we are under quarantine because of this virus. But yet, I assure you, God is in control. When bad things happen to good people, God is in control. And even when good things happen to bad people, God is in control of that too. This is crucial to remember when we find ourselves in a situation that is outside of our control. But this creates a tension, doesn't it? That is, it creates a why God moment. Why God have you allowed this to happen to me or to that person? They are a good person, just as the accounts that we read the last 2 weeks of these widow women who were helping God's servants. They were good. They were doing God's work, but yet their children became sick and died. We conclude when bad things happen that either God is angry with us, or he's inattentive, or he's late. God is either angry at something I have done or haven't done, or he just seems to be up there, inattentive, unaware of what is going on in my life. Or I have prayed and prayed for something, but yet nothing seems to happen. In the time of the prophet Elijah, God was angry with his people, and he brought about a drought, which caused a famine. You see, the people had turned on God as their king, had created these idols for them to worship, these Baal idols, and the people turned away from God and turned towards these idols. Yes, God was angry. But he showed favor on those who trusted him. He took care of his prophet Elijah. Elijah was told to go to the city of Zarephath, where he met a widow outside the city who was collecting sticks to make a fire to prepare her last meal before she and her son died. But yet, Elijah was able to, through God, save her and her son as he provided for them. But when her son got sick and died, she blamed Elijah for bringing God's judgment upon her because of her sin. She was right back to where she started from. Things were outside of her control. Once again, she was feeling the wrath of God. Elijah prayed on her behalf, and God answered his prayer, and her son was brought back to life and brought back to his mother. Now let's flash forward hundreds of years later. Jesus is entering the gates of another city, and he comes upon a funeral march. Now, we're not told of any act of faith that was shown, but we are told that Jesus had compassion for the widow. For the deceased was her only son and her only means of support. And he laid his hand on the coffin, and the son arose. Now, up until this point, the widow must have thought that God had abandoned her, or at least was inattentive to her plight. Now, soon after this story, we read that John the Baptist's disciples were sent to Jesus and was told to ask him if he really was the one. Now, why did he ask that? Because John was in prison. He was wondering why, if Jesus was God, why was he not helping him? Why was he not helping John get out of prison? If Jesus was God and God is in control, why isn't he doing anything for John? John could continue his ministry if Jesus would just get him out of jail. But this was not the will of God. It was not the right time. And Jesus told John's disciples to go back and tell them what they've seen, how the sick have been healed and the lame have walked and the blind can see, to assure him that God is at work and God is in control. Now, sometime later, Jesus is back in Jerusalem. His reputation of healing the sick has preceded him, and he's just driven out a demon from a man. And pressed upon him are many people wanting to be healed, and two in particular, one a woman who was hemorrhaging for 12 years, and the other an official of the synagogue whose daughter was sick and on the verge of death. Both individuals are having an experience where they probably thought God was inattentive to their plight. The woman had been tried to have been healed by many physicians, we're told, and had approached many priests, but she was treated as an outcast. The man who worked in God's house had to wonder why God had not healed his daughter. The woman touched Jesus' garment and she was healed instantly. And he told the woman that her faith had made her well. And Jairus, he was the synagogue official. He was told to do not be afraid and only believe as he entered the house. Prior to entering the house, he had been told that the little girl had died. But he told Jairus and his wife, she's not dead, she's only sleeping. And then he said, do not be afraid, only believe, and she would be made well. These are good words for today, aren't they? So back to the Old Testament, Elijah now is taken up into heaven in bodily form. That is, he didn't die. He was taken up by chariots of fire as witnessed by Elijah. Before he left, Elijah, which was Elijah's protege, had asked for a double portion of God's Spirit. And indeed, Elisha performed many miracles. Now, we read about how he parted the waters much like as Moses did so he could cross the waters of the Jordan to the other side. He made an axe head float that was lost into the water, and he prayed. It seemed like an insignificant thing at the time, but the axe head floated to the water, or floated to the top of the water. And we also read where he reproduced oil in a jar so that the woman could continually sell this oil and pay her debt so she wouldn't lose her land. Elisha was that way. He helped the oppressed and the poor. But he also worked within the government and carried out many signs and wonders before the government officials. And then in our Old Testament lesson that I read for you earlier, they were trying to bury this dead man when a bunch of Moabite marauders came upon them, and to quickly dispose of the dead man, they put him in the tomb where Elisha was. And we're told that when he touched the bones of Elisha, that this dead man came back to life. So what is with all these miracles? I think it demonstrates God's power, God's presence, and God's plan. God's power, God's presence, and God's plan. And this was the very message of Jesus in our story today from the Gospel of John. It's a rather lengthy passage, so I'm not going to read through it all, but if you want to turn to that, you can pause here as you retrieve your Bible if you don't already have it, and open up to the chapter 11 of the Gospel of John. Let me give you the setting. Here we're nearing the end of Jesus' ministry. That is, his time here on earth was about to come to an end, as he was to reveal his deity. Up until this point, the only person that he really told that he was God was the woman at the well. And by this time, there was much division over in Jerusalem and surrounding area whether Jesus was really the Messiah. Sure, they had witnessed his miracles and his healings, things they had never seen before. A blind man from birth was made to see. But yet, they had doubts. How could this man, a man from Galilee, be the Messiah? Because the prophecy says that he would be born of Bethlehem, which, of course, we know that he was. But the religious leaders at the time wanted to disparage him and say, well, he was just a nobody from Galilee. Nothing good comes out of Galilee. In fact, they said that no prophet had ever come out of Galilee, which they were wrong, because Jonah came from Galilee. They already had enough division as it was between the Sadducees and the Pharisees. They had this spat about the resurrection, whether people lived a life after death. The Sadducees did not believe there was an eternal soul, as did the Pharisees. And then Jesus, among his own inner circle, began talking about his own resurrection. Now, they had witnessed the resurrection of these two, which we spoke of before, the widow of Nain and Jairus' daughter. The thing that's different in this account that we're going to look at today is Jesus often referred to them as being asleep. But in the resurrection of Lazarus that we are about to read, he wanted to make it known that Lazarus was dead. He was not asleep. When Lazarus became ill, Lazarus is the brother of Mary and Martha. They lived in a small village about 2 miles southwest of Jerusalem.